Husker fans, Sam McKewon, along with Evan Bland, and today's special guest, Lincoln Arneal, who covers Nebraska volleyball for us. This is the Pick Six podcast for January 6th, 2021. Happy New Year, everybody. It's been a year, and we talked about 2020 in our last podcast, so we won't do a lot of that now, but it is sort of encouraging that we've turned the new calendar and we have schedules for volleyball, wrestling, men's gymnastics, maybe women's gymnastics. I don't know if we do. We may have them for those. And so it does feel like sports are coming back. There's been stuff going on in Nebraska football, players leaving, players coming back. There's been a little bit of news in Husker basketball, whatever. I'll have a little bit of an update on what the COVID pause is and just what to expect. We're recording this on a Wednesday. We may get Nebraska basketball news today about the COVID pause. We may get it tomorrow. So whatever I talk about may be old news by the time you listen to it. But we'll chat briefly about that as well. But I want to remind everybody that our sponsor is Team Schwalbach. The Schwalbach Agency is a family-owned all-state insurance agency with 4 licensed insurance pros, saving thousands of Nebraska Husker fans money. They sell homeowner, auto, life, and flood insurance across Nebraska. They also insure all the big boy toys, motorcycles, boats, RVs, and off-road vehicles. If you've had your roof replaced in the last 5 years, give Daryl Schwalbach, Kyle Schwalbach, Nancy Mostek, or Kyle Murdoch a call at 402-590-5200. They can help you save a bundle. Free, no-obligation insurance reviews and quotes. They're going to make sure that all their fellow Nebraska fans are properly protected. You can contact them at 402-590-5200 or www.nebraskaallstate.com. That's www.nebraskaallstate.com. Thank you to Team Schwalbach for being our sponsor here into 2021. All right. So we're going to start with this with the best team on campus. That'd be the Nebraska volleyball team. There's stuff going on with football and basketball, and we'll get there. But I thought it would be appropriate and prudent at some point to talk to Lincoln Arneal, who's didn't cover anything for us last semester because there wasn't any volleyball season to cover, but covered the previous year and wrote about Nebraska's release of schedule. And we appreciate Lincoln being on. And he's done a great job of covering Nebraska volleyball for us. And, of course, there's a hell of a lot of interest out there about the program because it is the elite program on campus. And there's a lot going on there because they now have a schedule. They now have a preseason ranking. They're 5th. It's a goofy poll. The team ahead of them is 8-0. They played 8 games left in the fall. I think the other teams, did Texas play in the fall too, Lincoln?
Yes.
Okay, so Texas is ahead of them.
They were number one in the unofficial fall coaches poll that existed.
Everybody knows that anybody who follows volleyball knows that the sport of volleyball, college volleyball, is run by the Big Ten and the Pac-12. They've dominated the national championships and the Final Fours in recent years. And so there is no conversation about volleyball if the Big Ten and the Pac-12, which are now playing, aren't in it. Now they're in it, and Nebraska's number 5. They return almost everybody. And Lincoln, what's your initial thoughts about, where the team is at, what they kind of been doing, and they've got about 2 weeks here to ramp up to the schedule. How are things going on the John Cook Nebraska volleyball front?
I think they're revving to go. They've been going at it for a couple weeks here. I think the week after Christmas they all returned to campus, started going full bore with practices, and they kind of had a modified fall schedule too. Almost kind of flip-flopped their schedule. So they had kind of a shorter practice-heavy schedule in October, November that culminated with the red-white scrimmage in mid-November. And then they took a couple weeks off, got done with finals, and then we're right back at it. I think then once practices start up in late December and this past week, that's when they've really kind of gone into regular season mode. They're doing the everyday testing for COVID. But now that they know the path to we've been waiting for this schedule since May, kind of once things got thrown up in the air. And really, Cook kept saying, we don't know anything. We don't have a schedule. We don't know what's in front of us. Now they do. They got 11 weeks. They'll play 22 total Big Ten matches. They'll play back-to-back matches at one site. So they have 5 road weekends, 5 home weekends, and then one series. Every team has one series that's home and away split with kind of their traveling partners. So I think Nebraska's sitting pretty well with the schedule. They I don't know if they ease into it with Big Ten volleyball, but they really get kind of a a good welcome back, kind of with Indiana and some other schools before they really get into the meat of their schedule, playing Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois on consecutive weekends too. So I think that Nebraska is sitting pretty well as far as how their schedule played out.
So yeah, I mean, the Big Ten's awesome in volleyball, but they do. Can you unpack that schedule a little bit? Because Indiana, Northwestern, and Maryland and Rutgers are those the four weakest teams in the Big Ten?
Yeah, probably. I mean, yeah, Rutgers has a brand new coach. Northwestern was not very good. Indiana, I mean, any team with if you don't take them seriously, they can come up and bite you. But I think that'll help Nebraska get their legs underneath them for the back half of the schedule. So I think that things stack up nicely for Nebraska. Like I said, with those, with that kind of, it's the end of February. They start their run with the 3 consecutive weekends, and then they close with Penn State. Nebraska also benefits that all of the top teams, I mean, the top 4 or 5 teams of Minnesota, Wisconsin, really the top team, Minnesota, Illinois, Penn State, all of those teams play each other too. So no one's going to get a weaker schedule. Nebraska benefits because every team has 2 teams they don't play. Nebraska benefits a little bit because they don't play Purdue, who checked in at number 13 in the poll that was released this week. So Nebraska benefits a little bit that they miss out on Purdue, and going to West Lafayette's always been kind of a bugaboo for the Huskers, and the kind of weird things happened there. They lost in 5 sets back in 2019. But so they benefit a little bit that, but all of the top teams that should be in contention for the Big Ten title will be playing each other this year.
What was true of Nebraska's volleyball team last year and is now and remains true? And by last year, I mean 2019, 18 months ago, and remains true with this team. Like, what are they good at? Where, if they have issues with struggles, where do those come, et cetera, et cetera?
I think that they know where their attack is coming from. It's going to come from the outside, from Lexi Sun. It's going to come from Maddie Kubik. I think those kind of the linchpins of their entire offense. Lauren Stivern is going to be an absolute beast in the middle. She's going to be one of the best middle blockers in the entire country. And kind of the thing that holds it all together is Kailyn Meyer. She made some good progress in 2019 toward the end of the year at setter to really kind of find out how to get the ball to her hitters in appropriate positions where they could do something with it. And then this is the one area where there is a little bit of turnover, where there's a little bit of uncertainty, is the passing, and then kind of the back row, making sure they can get the ball to Kailyn in a position where she can then have options to go to Kubik, to Sun, to Stivrins, to Sweet on the backside. So I think that Nebraska's attack is still strong and should be the backbone of their entire team.
I know, a lot of years Coach Cook has gone into the season trying to figure out 1-setter system, 2-setter system, depending on personnel. Is that a little bit more established this year, given how much they have returning, or is that something that they're still working through?
I think it's Kailyn Meyer's team until something changes too. I mean, they have a couple other setters. Nicole Drunick is on the team too, but I think she's kind of more of a hybrid. She can play some outside hitter. They used her occasionally. They would do a double switch where she would come in and serve for one rotation. But that was more to get a big block in the front row for Kailyn Meyer if they were playing up against a big attacking team. But I think that it's going to be a 1-setter system. I think Kailyn has shown that she can handle those responsibilities and really run the team at a high level when she's on. So I think that, was it a couple of years ago they had to cancel the spring game because they only had 1 set. They couldn't run a 2-side system. This spring, they'll actually have 4 setters on campus. They can only use 3 of them because one of the top recruit in the nation, Kennedy Orr, is on campus, but those players are ineligible to play in matches. So they'll have 4 quality setters on on campus, ready to go and kind of helping out along with Hames leading the bunch there.
Can I ask you too? I think the schedule is really fascinating, not just the teams that they're playing, but the fact that they're doing back-to-backs. I mean, you don't see that really at any level of volleyball. I mean, just this notion that Nebraska would play Wisconsin on consecutive days and that they'll play Penn State on consecutive days. How do you feel like that helps or hurts Nebraska? Does that make much of a difference? Do you want to have more depth in those situations? How do you kind of assess maybe how those back-to-backs will affect just competition in general this year?
I mean, if anything, it'll put more pressure on the coaches to game plan, to make adjustments 24 hours later, to really kind of figure out what pieces they need to move around. I mean, in some cases, especially early on for teams like a Nebraska situation, they'll just have the talent and execution to overwhelm some teams. But I think when you get to those big matches, when you're playing at Wisconsin twice, that'll be a chess match of figuring out, well, they ran this type of attack on Friday night, so we're going to counter that, change up our block, and try to take away that attack on Saturday night and see if Wisconsin counters that too. So I think it puts a lot of pressure on the coaches to be more creative, find more ways to game plan, and then the players going into executing that. So I think that'll be great. It was a lot of fun to see the kind of stakes raised. I mean, you see this all the times, and more so in the professional sports where you have these multiple game series where coaches are playing a chess match, going back and forth and making adjustments along. So I think we'll see that in volleyball too. But the other part of that too is that, I mean, you're playing at the same site. So Nebraska's playing at Wisconsin, but as of right now, there's been I think Minnesota said that they aren't going to allow fans. I mean, there's been no announcement about fans, but I think we're operating the procedure under the assumption that there will not be any fans. So that's different when you're playing in their field house, when you got 4,000 fans there as opposed to an empty gym's a little bit different atmosphere. So Nebraska hasn't won in Madison since 2013. So they have 2 shots this year to break that streak.
What do you think?
Wisconsin's the best team in the country, are they not? Or
yes. I mean, we talk about Nebraska returning everyone. Wisconsin returns everyone from a team that made the national championship game and also beat Nebraska 3 times last year in 9 sets. So they swept Nebraska 3 times. So I think Wisconsin's going to be pretty formidable, and that'll be the measuring stick for Nebraska this year.
What's the X factor then for this season to turn differently? Like what does Nebraska change or do differently to give you hope that they could get back to the Final Four, win the Big Ten, do everything that they're accustomed to doing? Yeah,
I think there's two areas where Nebraska really can take a step forward. The first one is the second middle blocker position. Callie Schwarzenbach held that down last year. She did pretty good. She injured a thumb midway through the season, and her attack really wasn't the same. But Nebraska brought in 2 new players, transfer from Missouri, Kayla Caffey, and so I think she's done a little. We saw them play once in that red-white scrimmage, and she looked pretty good. But they also bring in freshman Kailyn Meyer from Superior, who is a multiple-time athlete of the year, and just. I mean, she's a phenomenal athlete. People always said that she just take a little bit of while to get her legs underneath her and figure out what's it going to look like, get up to speed at the college level too. But she looked impressive during that scrimmage as well too. So I think that's one position that could be up for grabs. So either Schwarzenbach steps up her game or she'll lose her starting spot to one of the other 2 players. So I think that will really help diversify Nebraska's attack and give them another avenue to terminate find another way to increase their potency. Then the second area is their back row passing. Kenzie Knuckles was the libero all of last year. She did pretty well. Probably played her best match of the year. The last match against Wisconsin was flying all over the court and really kind of settled into that. And then the one change is that Megan Miller was kind of the defensive specialist who came in She transferred to Northwestern. They'll get to see her this year in a different uniform. But they brought in freshman Kianalini Akana from Hawaii. So getting her kind of figured in, and between her and Haley Densberger, who's a senior this year, hoping that one of those two can step up and fill that kind of defensive specialist role and really solidify that back row passing. Because I think when Nebraska struggled at times last year is when their passing broke down and were forced to run out of system and really limited their offensive options.
We would ask this question if it were a football player. So we'll ask it of Jad Sweet. She had her case was continued to February 4th, 2021. She was cited for a DUI, and she was supposed to have a hearing tomorrow, but that's been continued to February 4th. Is she playing? Is there going to be any? Do we know if there's going to be any discipline or any sort of things that she needs to process through? If this were a football player, we'd be asking the exact same question.
Yeah, that's why. We haven't got. I didn't get a chance to talk to Cook yet. We're still lining up kind of an opening press conference. We'll address that with him at that time. But she has been participating in activities. I think right after that incident was made public, Cook said that they'll handle it internally. And I don't know if there's a suspension involved with that, if she'll miss a match or portions of a match or what. But I think she's still part of the team, still going through team activities. So that is yet to be determined what exactly, if she'll miss any playing time on the court because of that case or where that case is in the legal process.
That'll be interesting to assess. It'll be interesting to watch that because, again, if it were a football player who is obviously as high a profile as a major, I mean, let's say it were, a player who is one of the top contributors on either side of the ball. I don't want to put a name to it because they haven't done anything. It would be a conversation that we would be asking Scott Frost about. What are you going to do with player X? So it'll be interesting to see how Cook handles that because, it's still pending. Now maybe it'll be sent into diversion. I don't know how, but it's still pending. So that'll be kind of interesting to watch. The standard with Nebraska volleyball is tricky, right? Because on the one hand, they're elite and they're going to win a lot of games. We already know that. They know that. So it's not really about, are they going to go beat Indiana twice? Well, of course they are. They will. I don't think any of us have a problem saying that. So really the peers at this point are what? Wisconsin and Minnesota and Penn State? That's kind of the conversation, right? Like their season's going to be defined by what they do against those three teams and then what they do once they get in the big dance, where they're probably going to face one of those three teams.
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's the standard that's set. I mean, Cook always sets the standard of teams they're chasing. For a long time, it was Penn State when Penn State was running off that string of national titles. It's been Stanford recently. I mean, Stanford just graduated their stud senior class who won 3 national titles in 4 years. And now I think it's Wisconsin is that measuring stick. They haven't won a national title, but I think that they return a lot of the experience, a lot of the postseason experience as well, too. So I think it does come to that. I mean, the NCAA tournament is also reduced slightly from 64 to 48. So there's a fewer number of 14 fewer at-large bids, but I don't think Nebraska shouldn't be in danger of not making the tournament. But you'll go run into a lot of high-caliber teams along the way, and you really need to prove yourself to meet those expectations. I think that you saw that last.
I think Lincoln, you've accidentally muted your line.
Yep. Nebraska could have. I mean, they were the 5th best team in the country. They could have made the Final Four in any region, but they were placed in Wisconsin's region, and Wisconsin was a clearly superior team. So that's one thing that Nebraska has to figure out is how to beat teams of Wisconsin's caliber, and that's what John Cook. That's his job. That's what he gets paid to do, and that's what I think Nebraska really enjoys, that challenge and figuring out how to get to that next level to be able to do that.
Will the superstar recruiting class help them in practice at least? In other words, giving them looks that maybe they wouldn't have otherwise gotten?
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely. I mean, they have a handful of those recruits. I mean, I mentioned Kennedy Orr. I don't know what her practicing status will be. I know she had suffered a knee injury late in her season, so I don't know if she'd be able to go full strength. But they have a number of other top recruits coming in. Bainhorst from Texas, Lexi Rodriguez, who is one of the best libero recruit in the country too. I think that'll help. I mean, I think anytime you improve your practice, well, I mean, they can't play in matches, but they can play across the net and raise a level of competition there too. So, I mean, that can only add to the skill level on that side, and then add to the strength that the first teamers are seeing in practice too. So. They may not see the floor this spring in matches, but I think that they will play a vital role in the success of the Nebraska team.
Nebraska volleyball players, this will be my last question. Evan may have more. Nebraska volleyball players have become sort of a first name designation with their fans and often with the media. And a lot of times that's how Cook talks about them, is by their first names. And so for many years now, or at least the last year, the team's kind of been defined by Lauren, Nicklin, and Lexi. Mm-hmm. But I feel like it's possible that the best player on the team this year could be Maddie Kubik.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I think that maybe you saw flashes of Maddie last year where she would just take over matches. And that the Minnesota match that went 5 sets, Maddie had 6 kills and 2 blocks in a set that went to 15 points too. I mean, she just completely took that match over as a freshman. And I think that she has, I mean, the one thing that Nebraska fans chase is the Michaela Fecki. When she hit the ball, it sounded different. You could tell with your eyes closed that Michaela Fecki was hitting the ball. It sounded different. Kubik is not at that level, but she has some thump behind the ball. And just watching the one match that we've seen publicly, because we haven't been able to go to practices or see anything else like that. But the scrimmage match, she looked stronger. She looked like she was able to. I mean, she looked like she was ready to take her game to another level, and really show what she's capable of too. So I mean, I think that Maddie. First name Maddie, really has the capability to take her game to another level and be an All-American.
Yeah, that'll be interesting to watch. I guess she is in between. I mean, I don't know that she'll ever be quite as good as Fecki, but she's really, really good, and it'll be interesting to watch her this year. Good kid too.
And she's super athletic too. I think one of her best attacks is when she attacks from the back row down the pipe too, because she can jump and has the athleticism to hit that shot that really is a tricky shot. So she's very multiple, and where she's dangerous from anywhere on the court.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to watch her growth, because I suspect she's going to be the big gun this year. Evan, do you have any other questions for
one more? I just have one more. I mean, I look back at Nebraska's. The stat still is just insane to me that they went to 4 straight Final Fours. That ended last year. So, I'm just curious, what within the program, I mean, obviously they want to win a national title, but is it title or bust for that group? Or would getting back to the Final Four kind of continue that level of excellence? What would be considered a successful season outside of the obvious championship?
I think this year, given everyone's returning, I don't know if it's championship or bust is dream scenario, but I think it's Final Four or nothing this year too, especially because we haven't even mentioned this. The Final Four is going to be in Omaha this year. It's going to be in their backyard, and they're 2 for 2 in titles when the Final Four has been played in Omaha. So I think that'll be in April. We don't know if fans will be allowed, whether it's a limited number or not. But I think they like their chances. If they get to the Final Four, they'll come what may. Whatever's going to happen will happen at that point. So I think that this year, if they don't make the Final Four, especially with the roster they have returning, the talent they have, it'll be a letdown. It'll be a major letdown and bordering on failure for the season. So I think this year, especially, it's Final Four bust. And then who knows what will happen. It'll depend on who they face in the semis. I mean, how again, the sports world we're dealing with, if players are ineligible or players are out with COVID, or who knows what's going on at that point. So I think that they want to get to the Final Four and take what will happen there. So I think that they have a very good shot at winning it. They're one of the small teams that have a chance to win a championship this year. But Final Four in Omaha they've been talking about this for 2 years, knowing that they were going to have a core that would be in the program in 2 years. So
last question. I have one more. Why is Tyler Hildebrand here?
I think he connects with John Cook on a level that few coaches have. The easy one. There's a lot of things that raise.
Why is he here though? Like he can.
Here?
Why is he here?
Why is he here?
I mean, what is it? Isn't he here to? I mean, the presumption was when they hired him. Well, there's the next guy.
Yeah, and
his wife. They're the coaches.
I don't think he will ever say that, but I think in the back of his head, he is in position to take over.
Well, yeah.
Whenever John Cook wants to step down, I think he's in position to be the first choice to take over that role, and that could be a couple of years from now, it could be whenever. But I think that puts him in position to take over one of the elite volleyball programs in the country.
Well, that it would be a combination of. I mean, obviously, Kayla's moved on, right? And I know John Cook is very close to her, and she's moved on to become a head coach.
Yep. She's at Ole Miss, yeah.
Yep. You obviously have the guy at Illinois. Maybe him.
Dennis, yeah.
And then Danny at Louisville.
Mm-hmm.
But, this guy comes back. His wife is an extraordinary coach and player in her own right.
Yeah.
She's not on the roster to coach the team this year. I understand that. I don't know how she's not going to have her. She'll obviously have thoughts and 2 cents and 3 cents and 4.
She has quite a booming interior decorating business that she wants to apparently focus on.
Well, I understand that. I just, to me, it just feels like it's what Coach Pettit once did with Coach Cook.
Mm-hmm.
Like, John left because he knew he was going to come back and he was going to run it. And there was like a 1 year gap. And anyway, we'll see. That's my last question. That's a story lingering underneath this. They signed the recruiting class. The recruiting class is coming. They're already here. The recruiting class, and a lot of times when really good coaches decide I'm going to move forward with X, Y, and Z, they leave behind the very best players they can.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. I'm not saying I know anything. I don't know anything. I don't know John Cook. I just, I look at decisions that are made and I'm like, this guy is coming back and he's getting a lot of money and his wife knows her stuff too. And, she could be a head coach anywhere. So, like it feels like something. I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. They won't tell you one way or the other, but yeah, it does kind of, you look at what's sitting there and the easiest answer may be that.
I always, I told this, I think, to Evan one time, that I always thought Kayla Banworth would be the head coach one day. If she could go somewhere else and prove it, that she just had a connection with Cook that was unique. And he always thought she was basically the best libero he'd ever coached. Maybe even in some ways, I wonder if he thought she was the best player he ever coached. But, we'll see how she does it in Ole Miss.
Yeah, and they started a little bit, but I know she's signed a good recruiting class. I think she was one of those coaches who needs that head coaching experience.
Right.
She's a little more reserved personality-wise, but to see her run her own program, figure out her identity, how she runs things, that'll be good for her in the long run too. And if she does want to come back, if that opportunity, I think that this is a good step to make that more possibility.
Cook's the king of the sport, in my opinion. I understand Stanford has been extraordinary. But Stanford is a unique institution that will always get good players because of its academic reputation and its proximity to California. But Nebraska is its own brand. They don't get these crowds at Stanford. So the king of the sport is John. And so I there's this part of me that just wonders, like, who's going to get to sit on that throne? Yeah. Who's going to be the king or queen of Nebraska volleyball? And thus, college volleyball
Oh yeah.
in 5 years.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. I mean, Russ Rose is getting up there too at Penn State. Some might argue that he carries a lot of weight, but I don't know how much longer he'll be at Penn State. And there's a lot of other. Hugh McKewon up in Minnesota has been doing a lot of great things. And like I said, there's a lot of possibilities out there. John Cook does sit in the. He's a spokesman for the sport and arguing, and he gets to live his dream scenario this spring and play spring volleyball, not have to worry about football, and volleyball will get spotlight in April and dominate that month.
I look forward to it. I think they'll get great ratings. I think people love watching volleyball.
For sure.
Thanks a lot, Lincoln. I appreciate it. You can stay on the podcast if you want, or you don't have to. But we're going to talk. We're going to talk some other stuff. Evan, JoJo Domann, Cam Taylor-Britt. They're back.
Yes, they are. They sure are. It's been a good week for Nebraska senior decisions, right? I mean, I think they lost their first 5, and I know you talked about Mills as a big one still upcoming. I felt like Domann might have been the top one. Like if you could pick one guy to come back, I would have gone with him just because Nebraska doesn't have a guy like that on the roster. They don't have an outside backer, a guy who can, do what he did against Minnesota, drop 30 yards and knock away a deep ball, or who can set an edge and, physically take some punishment, rush after the passer, get into the run game. Like he can do everything. And so you think about what the defense would have looked like without him next year. You're talking probably, using multiple guys in different situations, subbing someone in for run situations, subbing someone in maybe more in a nickel or dime situation if someone's passing. And now you can just leave him out there. I mean, he was the guy, I believe, who had the most snaps of anyone on the defense this year. He's got a ton of experience. And I think the other thing about him is that he missed most or all of 3 seasons with injuries and redshirting. So it's not like this is a guy who's playing his 5th season of college football. He's come into his own. This is his time to show what he can do to maybe build that draft stock. And then with Cam Taylor-Britt, man, I mean, he's in a similar ilk as a guy who could play all over for Nebraska. He's played safety. He's played some nickel. He's played corner. They love him at corner. Guys who can play corner well are worth their weight in gold. And he's proven that he's that guy for Nebraska. So, I mean, it's a huge step, I think, not just for the flexibility of the defense next year, but also allowing the guys behind them to develop more, right? Like you don't have to throw out Quentin Newsom necessarily next year, or Braxton Clark. One of those guys maybe they can trade off at the other corner spot, whatever. It's huge. I think the decisions are still to come. Obviously, Will Honus, Ben Stilley, will one of your 2 starting safeties come back, and Markel Dismuke or Deontay Williams? I feel like the line there is 2.5. I think if you get 2 or 3 of those guys back, 3, you'd be thrilled. 2, I think you'd still be pretty happy. But, we've talked about kind of just how interesting it is in a program like Nebraska that bases itself around burying opponents in points. The defense was the strongest aspect of that team in 2020. It's looking that way again next year with all these returners. And I mean, if you get 2 or 3 of those guys additionally back next year, I don't know how you don't look at 2021 Nebraska and say it starts with the defense, and that's what they have to rely on to win some games and get back to a winning season.
So let's project a little bit here for a second. Let's say that all 4 of the guys don't come back, and I'm not saying that won't happen. I actually think 2.5 is a good line. But what do you lose if Stilley, Honus, Williams, and Dismuke don't come back? In other words, which would be the biggest loss of that 4?
I think they have depth on the D-line to fill in. I think Ty Robinson has shown that he can be, the guy up there. Casey Rogers has looked good. They have some depth there still. Again, don't get me wrong, having Stilley back would be great, and he'd probably have his best season as much as he's developed and settled in there. Yeah. But I think Nebraska could probably absorb that a little bit more. Even if they get one of the safeties back, I feel like that would make a huge difference for presumably Miles Farmer to step in there and have someone to learn under. So if they don't get either of those guys back, I think that's a big deal for that secondary, which then suddenly you're replacing 3 longtime starters and those 2 plus Boodle.
Mm-hmm.
Honus is interesting too because of how that position kind of played out this year. They're going to miss Colin Miller as it is. It kind of looks more and more like Nick Henrich is going to be that guy, maybe more on the inside than the outside. They like Luke Reimer, but is he able to hold up for a Big Ten season? I don't know. Seems to me like that middle linebacker spot could still use some depth. And again, Honus is another guy who missed most of 2018 with that knee injury. He has said that he wasn't full strength necessarily in 2019, still kind of working his way back, even if it was just mentally. And he had a really good season this year. So I think if he has pro aspirations, it would make a lot of sense for him to come back. And I think that's probably be my spot, would be Honus, getting him back in that middle linebacker spot and being kind of an anchor for some of the younger guys to settle in around him.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I think they are going to get a couple of these guys back. I mean, I think Honus maybe, Stilley, feel good about. I mean, I feel kind of good about that when JoJo put out his return video. Stilley kind of had I think it was Stilley who had a comment about it, like, knowing that it might happen that way, but I think they would benefit from Williams and Dismuke too. The one area where you kind of think about a little is that secondary. If they don't get either safety back, then you're looking at a Miles Farmer. I don't really think Braxton Clark is a safety, so I don't think you would move him there. But you're looking at Miles Farmer. You're looking at Isaac Gifford, Noah Pulla-Gates. There'd be an opportunity for those guys to really accelerate their development and learn on the fly. I don't know even know who else would we be talking about at that point. A walk-on, it's way too much to put on a true freshman to come in, whether it's Kobe Bretts or Marcus Buford's a little different because he's a post-grad guy, but he didn't play. He played a kind of a weird volunteer season, scrimmage season this year. So, that'd be a spot where they'd have to cover things up a little bit, and they may have to adjust. That would be a worry spot. But as it stands right now, let's say Stilley and Honus come back. I think they might. I think they could. That's a pretty good front seven, Evan. I mean, that's everybody back, and it's adding an inside linebacker from Northern Iowa. You could have a legit 4-man rotation at inside linebacker, and I think under those circumstances, Luke Reimer can't stay healthy. He can't. Mm-hmm. And so then you'd have 4 men there. Your outside linebacker situation is what it is, but you still have Domann and Tanner and Nelson. No great pass rushers there, but then you got a Feldarius Payne that you're using as a defensive end / outside linebacker-ish kind of guy. And I thought Feldarius had a pretty good season, in the limited snaps he got. I thought he did what he was supposed to do. And then you hope one of those rookies comes along, one of the young kids. You got him in the program. You got Jamari Butler. You got Blaze Gunnerson. You got a few others, and then you got some incoming dudes who might be able to help. So that front seven looks really good, and they're going to need it to be good because they're going to face some teams next year that want to run the hell out of the football. Illinois is going to transform into a Wisconsin light. Buffalo, who lost Jared Patterson, I think he's going to the NFL. But that program is going to run the shit. They're going to run the crap out of the ball. I mean, that's just who they are. And that's what they do. And that's what Lance Leipold does. So you're going to have, when you play Buffalo, you're going to be playing, Illinois. You're going to be playing a team that's very similar to that, very meat and potatoes, blue collar. They'll throw it some, but they love to run it. And, they've almost knocked off a number of Big Ten teams. So you better pack a lunch next year with your run defense. And I think they have. I think they're going to have a good lunch, a thermos full of soup and, sandwiches and everything. I think they'll have that. Pass defense is always tricky because, so much of what happens in pass defense is comes down to, do you play the ball right when the ball is thrown in the air? And Sometimes Nebraska did that really well last year. Sometimes when they played Illinois, when they played Purdue, they had moments where it didn't work. And I actually think Quentin Newsom could be a better corner than many corners Nebraska's had. I think Nebraska believes that too. And then I think Braxton Clark is insurance. And then you've got Cam Taylor-Britt. And then you got Taman Lynham, who maybe he can play safety. I don't know. He's pretty skinny. So if he hasn't put on weight, he's probably a corner. I think they're going to be okay at corner. I really do. And Nadab Joseph, whatever he can do. So I think safety is probably the question mark. Now, they get back Williams and Dismuke, and I'm comfortable saying that's going to be one of the top 25 defenses in the country next year. Mm. I really do. And I know people look at the stats this year and go, what are you talking about? I mean, they weren't that good this year. But I'm like, again, throughout the scoring number, because Nebraska's offense and special teams repeatedly put the defense in terrible positions on defense, the scoring numbers are a little off. You look at the yardage numbers, you look at the yards per play, you look at sort of the run defense when they're not involved in a quarterback, and you can see that they got a lot better. So Keem Green left, not a surprise there. He wasn't very good, and we'll just leave it at that. Matthew Anderson leaves the program, probably going to seek an option somewhere else, probably at a what would you think, a Sun Belt, Conference USA, maybe even FCS level.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And I tweeted this out too, but it got me curious. When he left, he was just the third 2019 scholarship player who had enrolled to leave Nebraska. I mean, it really kind of made me appreciate a little bit more that 2019 class and how stable it's been. And then I kind of, how these things go. I kind of went down a rabbit hole and started looking, okay, how does that compare to some other classes? And as we know, like 2020, they've already had 5 scholarship enrollees already leave, all from Florida. But you start going back, 2018 has had 11, 2017 has had 10, 2016 has had 13. And then you can go back to 2015 had 7, and then 9 in 2014. So it's like, it really, I guess I just appreciated anew how much of a rock that 2019 class has been. And it was just kind of interesting that, Matthew Anderson was a guy who didn't have a lot of, I think Nebraska was his only Power 5 offer.
Yeah.
So it's not.
They took a risk there. I mean, they felt like they could take somebody who was obviously skinny, put weight on him, and
sure.
But the reality is, and this is not. There are times when departures are a knock on no one.
Sure.
And I think where we're at right now at this moment is Nebraska may have been right to take Anderson. He may have been right to come here. And when he arrived, a guy named Ethan Piper and a guy named, Nuruddin Nwili coming from Colorado State, which there's no way anybody could have known that. I think he's probably a more game-ready dude than Anderson. Those guys are here, and they're not going anywhere. And, you've also got some big boys in that pipeline that are, I think they like, where Brant Banks can play. He's not left tackle because I think it's going to be Corcoran, but you play Banks somewhere else. Maybe you move guys around. I think their offensive line is in good shape.
Yeah, I agree. I wanted to.
It's not a bad thing when a guy leaves just because he wasn't quite good enough to pump into that too deep. Does that make sense?
Isn't it interesting too? Like we're talking about the defense and the offense. I think it's fascinating how the pandemic and how the extra year of eligibility is kind of affecting these units at Nebraska differently, right? Like the defense in 2021 would look a heck of a lot different had all these seniors been forced to move on than it will now. Like there would have been a ton of question marks on that defense next year in a standard season. And in a way, and obviously, you never want a pandemic and to go through what they went through, but in a way, that's going to make that defense a lot better. I don't know if that's the case on offense, even though you get a lot of these guys back. You can run it back with, Adrian Martinez and some of the other guys. Isn't it? I just think it's fascinating to see how that extra season of eligibility I mean, it really feels like it's working in the defense's favor, and the offense, you're just kind of like, I mean, I don't know. It seems like as big of a question mark as ever.
Big decision still to be made. Dedrick Mills, big one.
Yeah.
We already talked about the defensive guys. Matt Farniok's still out there too. I think Matt could probably play in the NFL next year. I don't know if he feels like he needs another year of seasoning. He's been a starter now since, well, he's a starter for 4 seasons.
Yeah, 2017.
How much more does he feel like he needs from Nebraska? I think he's graduated, so there's not much else there for him to do. So I could see him moving on and going to the next level. But he hasn't made that decision yet. Obviously, there'll still be guys that leave via the transfer portal. That's just begun. I don't think that piece is done yet, and probably won't be done for, I don't know, a couple of weeks, because the kids don't come back until January 24th, so they don't necessarily have to enter it until this week or next week. And then, of course, they may be, on campus this semester just taking classes before they decide where they're going to go. A lot of these kids are going to go into the portal, and they're not going to get out, not right away. Not unless there's scholarship changes made, because there's just not enough scholarships to offer each year to get all these kids out of the portal. I think Nebraska's probably waiting on some decisions before they pursue the portal, but I do think the wide receiver spot is a place where they've got to go right away. I don't think they can assume that they're going to just naturally get better there. I have a sense that some players will leave via the transfer portal, guys who haven't played. So I don't know that they're going to be as deep as they theoretically were this year. And at the end of the day, when you go back and see who they're playing at Rutgers, they're playing Warner, Lever, and Falk. That you can't roll with that. That's not that isn't gonna that's good, but that's not where they want to be. They obviously want guys that you would have offered scholarships to out of high school. Guys that are fast, and Falk, I think, is a pretty physically gifted player, actually. But they want guys that obviously can do some of the things they want to do on offense. And so, if you got to go to the portal to get a guy that's already done that somewhere else, then that's what they'll do. I mean, Noah would have started on this team. They didn't have Noah this year, but he would have started.
Yeah.
So, if they can go make an upgrade somewhere, they'll probably try to do that. Because, again, they're measuring themselves against walk-ons, not against scholarship guys. So it's like, walk-ons can never expect, well, I played a lot last year, so I'm going to get a scholarship. Now they might go find somebody else to give that scholarship to. So, because walk-ons aren't on scholarship. We'll see where things take us. I think we'll have some interesting interviews here in the next several days, and we'll see what we have to talk about next week. Basketball briefly. Actually, I want to talk recruiting really quick. We're not going to talk about the guy they just got from Hawaii. We talked about him last week, but I want to give an update on Avante Dickerson. I know a lot of Nebraska fans are intrigued by him because he is an Omaha West Side grad and a kid that did not sign with Minnesota on signing day and said he wanted to wait. And I think people should just take that seriously, that he wanted to see Minnesota's campus. He still hasn't done that yet. I think it will probably be a decision after he sees that campus and whether he thinks that's comparable to Nebraska or not. There was Oregon and Boston College in there at one time, and I think it's important for him to be able to go and see Minnesota's campus. And if he's able to do that, and then there'll be some sort of final decision-making process. I think it's my understanding that some of the Nebraska signees have kind of tried to stay away a little bit. Dickerson kind of keeps his own counsel. He's not going to be easily influenced by kids just telling him what they want, even if Kobe Bretz is one of his good friends. I think it's still in a holding pattern, bottom line. There's a presumption I get sometimes online in message boards or wherever, well, he's going to sign with Nebraska. And I just, I'm going to write an update for this later today. I don't know that that's true. I'm not sure that Nebraska knows that's true. I think it's still up in the air. And I think he could, but I think at the same time, if he goes to Minnesota on a sort of a campus visit, because you can't take an actual visit, and just walks around campus and likes it, I think he's going there. So it's still to be determined. It still hasn't been defined yet. He's a big time player. He's a high 4-star. He'd be one of the top recruits in the class. He'd be a huge addition to Nebraska. His coaches appreciate the fact that he's not only fast, but he doesn't get fooled twice. And so one of the things they'll say is you can't fool him easily. You teach him something and he absorbs it and he takes it and he executes it. So it's not one of these, well, he's a good athlete, but he may be out of position. Truth is, he's a pretty good athlete and he's usually in position. He probably just needs to gain about 10, 15 pounds in muscle, a little bit bigger physically, but everything else is there. And so Dickerson's a guy that could probably play relatively early, maybe in year 1 or year 2. For a team that could use defensive backs potentially, that would be a good addition, but we don't have a defined answer on that yet. So I thought I would give a little bit of an update, and I'll be writing something too. On to Nebraska basketball briefly. So they had a COVID pause on Monday. Nebraska and Purdue jointly announced that on Monday. They didn't play the game on Tuesday. And as of today on Wednesday, we still don't have any real news about exactly what's going to go. But Nebraska's game with Indiana on Sunday is still on a schedule. I think we could hear news from Nebraska today or tomorrow. I think it's possible that, Nebraska may not have significant COVID issues and that there was a pause between the two schools out of what really does amount to abundance of caution. It wasn't because half of one team is down, and obviously Purdue's playing Friday. So you can kind of deduce what's going on there, but I think it's possible that it's a limited situation and that Nebraska will be right back on the court. Creighton women's basketball, for example, had to postpone for 3 games. So they're shut down for 10 days or something like that. I don't know that that's going to be Nebraska's story. I don't, but we'll know more by either today or tomorrow. So
is there any big picture, impact there, or is that just kind of one of the deals that they have to handle in a COVID season?
Well, if any positive player is going to be held out for 17 days at this point. And so, for example, in theory, if you had a team that had 5 guys out, but 5 guys test positive for COVID, they're out for 17 days from competition, right? That happens. So they would rather not have that, obviously, because they'd be out for a while. But the Big Ten has built in, some rescheduling prongs that they can hook games onto. I don't think that's going to be that big of a deal. I think they'll be able to get games here or there when they need them, and if they need them, Purdue game will be rescheduled. That would be my sense. So, but we'll know more, I think, today or tomorrow, and it may not be a big issue with the schools. We'll just have to see. That's kind of how it's going to go in the COVID era, but I think Nebraska will be all right, but we'll just have to watch and see.
About Derrick Walker's return, what can we kind of expect to see that impact be on the team? I mean, what's the level of significance there in him coming back and how Nebraska will play?
Progressive impact. So initially, I think it could be a little muted by the fact that he's returning, and that takes time. And he'll have to get his wind back and all that, his conditioning. So he's probably not going to play 25 minutes in his first game, which will be against Indiana instead of Purdue. And that's a good thing. Indiana's post play isn't probably quite as burly as Purdue's. So the impact will progressively get better as time goes on. Same with Eduardo Andre, who's, I think, back in his 4th or 5th game back, 5th, since his COVID situation, which we kind of deduced because obviously they didn't announce that officially, but yeah. The post play in the Big Ten is so good and so dominant that any dent that Walker can make will be positive. And by dent, I mean on the offensive end and to some degree the defensive end. Like, I don't know that Derrick Walker is going to stop Luka Garza from scoring 30 points. I don't know if he can do that. But offensively, they could really use a guy that could go finish shots. And there's been so many times in the last 2 weeks where the guards are moving the ball pretty well. The ball ends up in Ivan Ivan's hands, and it either Ivan knows his limitations and passes it right back out, or he tries to go up with it and it doesn't end that well. I mean, let me just give you the stat and then we'll be on our way here. Evan, in Big Ten play, Ivan has taken 16 shots, and he's made 10 of them, but he's only taken 16.
Wow.
What does that tell you?
Too confident.
Well, he's not confident. Yeah, and he knows better. He knows better than to do that and to put up shots he can't make. He's made a couple jump hooks, which is good. Eduardo Andre's taken 3 shots in 4 games. I mean, you know, that's not what they're asked to do. Ivan's doing what he's asked to do. He's a pretty damn good rebounder. He's blocked some shots. He hedges on screens well. Ivan does what they ask him to do. He's just not a natural finisher of the basketball right now. And you know what? Neither was Andre Almeida. I mean, you remember him. He wasn't either. A lot of big guys aren't. They come to the game a little late or you know, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be 6'10". So I don't know what it's like to coordinate all that. I mean, I'm a tiny fat man. So like, but I'm slightly coordinated because I'm only 5'9", and my center of gravity is lower. So I'm not, 7 feet off the floor. And so I don't want to sit here and judge what these guys do or don't do. It's amazing to me that they can do it at 6'10". So, but Nebraska's had some big men in the past who were not adept at scoring the ball. I mean, Alex Marich was. And I mean, way years ago, Rich King was, Dave Hoppen was, but they're not all like that. So, Ivan's doing the best he can. I think Derrick Walker can finish at the basket. You remember Leslie Smith from a couple of years ago?
Mm-hmm.
If they get Leslie Smith out of this, that'd be great. So if they can get what Leslie Smith was giving him, and Leslie was a better offensive player than Ivan is. I mean, I don't know what his numbers were, but they probably weren't as gaudy. But of course, he was playing in Tim Miles' system, not in Nebraska's system. So not in the Hoiberg system. But if they got Leslie Smith out of this guy, I'm looking this up right now. What did Leslie Smith average in 2013, 2014? Leslie averaged 5.4 points and 4.8 rebounds a game. And he shot 51% from the floor. And again, he took like, I don't know. He took 5 or 6 shots a game too. Like that was the other thing. So because like Ivan's giving them that statistically right now, he's taking 4 shots a game and he's making 45% of them. But in a Hoiberg offense, you would wish that the post guy would roll to the basket and take 6 or 7 shots a game and average 8 or 9 points, or maybe even 10. And Ivan gives him what he can, but he's not an offensive weapon per se. Sense?
It does. It's a gauntlet, man.
The Big Ten's really, really good.
Man.
I'll tell you what. I have not. I mean, it's the atmosphere at the games has been mediocre. But the Michigan State game was an exception. That was intense. You could feel it on the court. We were a little ways up, the media guys, but you could feel it. That was it's cool. Michigan State brings something out in other teams. That's part of what makes Michigan State, is that they come on the floor with their all black uniforms and their barely visible Sparty logo, and they just play a certain way, and you're like, that's why they are who they are, because even though they're not the best team in the league, and they're not, they bring something out of the opponent, and they bring something to the floor. And Izzo's over there screaming and the F word and stomping around, and he goes about 6 possessions without wearing a mask, and he's lost in his own head, and it's just fun. You're just like, man, I wish there was a crowd here, because this is kind of a show. And I thought Nebraska was up to that moment pretty impressively. And they've been up to the moment against Michigan too. They played hard. Now they need to kick it over and win a game. And Indiana on Sunday, that'll bring something out of Nebraska too. And I think Nebraska's got a shot. I really do. I think they've got a shot to win it. So we shall find out. We shall see. That is our podcast for this week. Thanks for everybody listening about volleyball. Love it. Love that the sport is back. Love that John Cook and his crew will be doing what they're doing here in the spring. For Evan Bland, I'm Sam McKewon. We'll be back next week to talk more Husker football and maybe delve into the big question. And you know what I'm talking about, quarterback.